You want the kind of course of the conversation to go in a very particular path.
It's going in a particular
so
path.
that
James,
when you ask me a question and I give you an answer, you're like, oh no, answer it in this way if you don't mind.
James.
So remember when Mohammed Hijaz in his debate with David Wood said,
I knew I was going to have to give you a free Arabic lesson here today. I knew it. And that's why the translators put for, not to the Prophet.
and the Muslims in the audience were shouting Takbir, cheering and shouting without realizing he actually confirmed David's point. This is misdirection 101. Ijaz, like many Muslims, when analysing the historicity of the Bible, often employ a fallacy called ad ignorantium, which is when someone thinks that a specific belief is true because we don't know that it isn't true, and I'll expand on this later on. Because I want to keep this one brief, I'll just focus on the critical mistakes Ijaz made during this debate. And just like Mohammed Hijaz, he ends up refuting himself and highlighting how he holds an untenable position. Let's first listen to the response that Ijaz, a master of sophistry like Lenny Hijab, gives in his first response to the haymaker question asked by Stephen.
Did Jesus die by crucifixion?
That is what historians claim, and that's what historical sources claim which have survived.
Notice how Ijaz shifts his answer towards the historians, but Stephen is quick on the ball and pushes for a clear answer.
But I'm not asking what historians say, I'm asking what you believe.
What I believe, when it comes to debates, I have theological beliefs and I have methodological beliefs.
You suffer from extreme cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias, which is why you try to go against conventional historical methodological approaches employed by qualified historical scholars to try and justify your untenable position. If Ijaz ever did a peer-reviewed paper on his historical methodological approach, the first place it would appear is in the bin. Ijaz's historical method is solely based on his theological belief, which is why even liberal scholars do not take Ijaz's apparently groundbreaking new historical methodological approach. But let's continue.
So when it comes in terms of the Quran, no, as a Muslim, I do not believe that Christ was crucified.
His opposition is because he's a Muslim, because a confirmation of the crucifixion destroys his whole religious belief. But let's continue.
But I also affirm what the Quran says, that this is a claim which exists in history.
Did you hear that? Let's repeat that moment again.
But I also affirm what the Quran says, that this is a claim which exists in history, which exists in history, in history, in history, in history.
Thank you, Mr. Ijaz. In your own words, you admit there is a high probability that Jesus was crucified. Debate over, case closed. But let us be clear. The probability that the crucifixion happened based on all evidence is so high that all scholars with a worthwhile reputation consider it as a fact of history. But we're not finished just yet. Let's listen to some more of how Ijaz gets himself busted.
I think using probability, it's a high probability that he would have been killed. But as I mentioned in my opening statement, when historians look at continuities in regards to probabilities, they actually point out that things could be outside of the scope of continuities, and therefore just because something is highly probable does not mean that it is fully possible and therefore absolute.
So he just said there are things that can happen outside of the historical continuity, which means the evidence is not absolute. And guys, this is the art of misdirection. In other words, Ijaz has just exposed his bias, because it seems by Ijaz's own words, he wants absolute evidence when he knows historically this is impossible with pretty much every historical event of antiquity and beyond, therefore destroying the credibility of his own historical methodological approach, But to his uninformed Islamic audience, they would believe he's making a valid point. This is why historians such as Will Durant, for example, state that higher criticism has applied to the New Testament a test of authenticity so severe that by them 100 ancient worthies, for example Hammurabi, David and Socrates, would all fade into legend. And this is where Stephen catches him out on with his next question.
Okay, so you want a 100% certainty that Jesus died by crucifixion?
Repeat that question again.
You want a 100% certainty that Jesus died by crucifixion?
Am I allowed to ask you what you mean by that? Let me answer. Maybe you can clarify.
Clarify it.
So what I don't understand in regards to the question is, are you asking me in regards to my belief as a Muslim, or are you asking me as when I do you use the historical method?
You see how he starts playing dumb? Of course, it's using the historical method, the one that you apparently claim you have been using to bring the historicity of the crucifixion into question. So let's continue.
So using the historical method based on the principle of continuities, scholars would generally say that it is more probable than less probable that he died.
Okay, what is your position on that then?
My position that it is probable, as is the position of all scholars.
Abdul, stupid donkey.
There we have it, guys. Ijaz believes the crucifixion is probable in accordance with scholars. But Ijaz believes it's not something that happened. But then he's saying it's probable, but then the scholars have confirmed it's pretty much a fact of history. So Ijaz has just debunked himself and weeks worth of live streams in a few seconds.
Yeah, I mean, it comes across that it's incredible that Ijaz acknowledges that the probability that Jesus was crucified is greater than the probability that he wasn't. So again, I'm asking, why are we having this? Why are we doing this? Because again, the title of the debate was Jesus crucified? Regarding that. So that's I don't think I have anything more to say on that. So
Okay.
I'm sorry to say, Ijaz, but the Donkey of the Day award has certainly got to go to you.
Yeah, we understand this is a narrative that you believe theologically, but there's no historical background and foundation for this. And this is just demonstrated every time somebody says, okay, look, it may not be historical, but we just, it serves a purpose, it gives a point. That's a perfect answer, because you say, okay, this is not history, this is a narrative that you guys just believe based on faith.
Did you see what they did? Exactly what I said they would do, because they know history is not an absolute thing. So now they have created a narrative that the crucifixion is not historical, and that donkey Ijaz is nodding his head. But he already admitted in a debate that crucifixion probably did happen based on evidence. What a scam. And this is exactly what I was saying. This argument where they present their conjecture as evidence, which it's not. So on that note, I don't think there's anything else to say. Ijaz has admitted the biblical narrative gives a greater historical account than the Quran. So why would anyone in their right mind believe the Quran? Yet, Muslims only have a theological argument. Facts don't care about your delusions. And that's all, folks. Until next time, they can't hack the hack, and Jesus Christ is Lord. Paperboy signing out.
But I also